What's up there, YouTube? My name is Alex, also known as Intch95. I'm another Yu-Gi-Oh channel here on YouTube. I do everything from casual to competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, a little bit of Call of Duty, a little bit of Pokemon, Dragon Ball Super, you name it, product reviews. I do a ton of stuff on my channel. I'm a relatively good-sized channel that's still growing, but I want to do a video collaboration with TeamOneInch. They did a video collaboration and posted a video on my channel earlier this past week. You guys need to go check it out. They'll link it for you guys down below in the description, along with my channel if you guys want to come check me out. I interact with a lot of my subs when I do, comments and just videos and such. I take a lot of you guys' ideas and I make them into videos. So if you guys want to come check that out at the end of this video, feel free to. If not, I hope you guys had a great day and still enjoyed this video nonetheless. But TeamOneInch wanted me to do a discussion on Dueling Network, YGOpro, DevPro, all the different testing platforms that exist currently and are really actually just being attacked by different parties such as NAS and potentially Konami and other just different third parties and sectors of Konami that interact with Konami that really see these platforms as bad or something against the rules. So specifically against copyrights, copyright against images and just a lot of other legal actions that they're taking against them because they feel that, for whatever reason, they don't want them up. So it's likely a variety of reasons. It's not necessarily just one reason. Some people are claiming it's because it's promoting players and not promoting players, but inhibiting players from wanting to purchase product if they have access to online stuff for free and they can just play without actually putting money into the game. That's one side of it. The reality is those players, if they weren't going to put money into the game anyway, they probably, even if without those platforms, they probably weren't going to be investing much, if anything at all, into the game regardless. So that's one side of it. But the other side of it is that they feel that, they can probably develop a platform that's maybe better or on the same level as these platforms that is really monitored and secure and really first party based. So I think personally, I was a huge fan of Dueling Network. I never really used YGOpro or DevPro. I did recently download YGOpro. I did manage to snag a copy of all the files and download it just for deck profiles and such like that. But the thing that I want to really highlight in this video is that I think a lot of people are kind of making such a big deal out of this, which, don't get me wrong, it's a very big deal, but they're saying that this is likely going to be the death of Yu-Gi-Oh, or it's going to, be the downfall of Yu-Gi-Oh, or, other negative things like that. And I think that's not necessarily the case. I mean, if anything, I think players should be supportive of Konami despite them doing this. I mean, because it's not directly Konami, it's NAS, which is another group that works for them. If I'm not mistaken, they work with Shueisha TV and all the other groups that actually own the rights to things like images of the cards themselves in the game. But I think we should be supportive of Konami during a time like this, despite all of this potential legal action taking place, because that'll likely motivate them to come out with a simulator much faster and make a simulator that's just as good, if not better, than these already existing simulators. Because I think if we don't have something like this, it's not necessarily going to kill the game. I think it is going to stunt it a little bit, in the sense that, these platforms allowed players to test globally. I mean, you were able to play players in the OCG, or in, I'm in California, so I could play someone in New Zealand, or in China, or, in Mexico, or somewhere on the East Coast, or anywhere in between, literally globally. I could play anyone, anywhere, at any time I wanted. And that was what made this platform so awesome, along with its flexibility that you weren't restricted to something, like the automated system and the 3-minute rules and all the other things that YGOpro and DevPro potentially have, alongside glitches. But I think that this isn't necessarily going to kill the game. I think it's only going to hurt it from the sense of a community standpoint, because people didn't really interact prior to DN and YGOpro and DevPro as much, outside of anything like YVD. Or, back in the day, people would use AIM and Yu-Gi-Oh! Virtual Dueling. Some of you guys may have never even heard of YVD. It was pretty much like a downloadable version of YGOpro and DevPro, but had the flexibility of Dueling Network. It's still, I'm pretty sure you can still get it, but nobody really uses it, to my understanding, to my knowledge at least. And I don't think it's really updated. But I think even if you look at the game prior to all the top of the line DN, YGOpro platforms that existed, this game still grew. I mean, just thinking about it, this game was in some of the biggest, primes and really just peaks of its time, anywhere from 2002 to 2009, 2010. This game grew a ton. We saw some of the most insane tournament attendances despite players not necessarily having a platform like that. And I think we have to look at it from the sense that maybe Konami or all these other groups that are really trying to get these platforms taken down, not only do they maybe want to offer their own personal simulator, but maybe they're trying to push players to go out and go to locals more, because I know personally for the last couple years my local attendance really declined. I stopped going to locals for a variety of reasons, but that was one of the big ones. Competition started to decline. A lot of the better players really just started testing on Skype, on DN, and it really just deterred that competition. It got dull. I mean, what's the point of me going to locals if that testing that I'm getting isn't adequate enough, And that's what something like DN offers. It allowed players to test with the best of the best, their friends, and really network a lot better and communicate a lot more effectively without necessarily having to immediately purchase those cards or have to go out and proxy those cards and do all this extra effort if they were playing competitively, And I think because the competitive circuit and just competitive scene is such a minority in comparison to everything else in any type of game, video game, card game, whatever, I think because it's such a minority and the majority is casual, if the majority ends up also using all these platforms and they're not investing as much money as the competitive players anyway, I think that is the perspective that Konami and NAS and all these other groups are looking at it from, So if the majority is less likely to invest as much as, an average competitive player, or, if you take a competitive and a casual player one-on-one, if the competitive player is going to invest a lot more, right? But they're only going to invest in one thing, as opposed to the casual player who, if they have money and they're willing to invest, they may invest in booster boxes and packs and, in locals and regionals and everything in between, just because they want to explore, they enjoy playing for fun. They're not really as calculating as competitive players who both want to remain in their budget if they're trying to be competitive as much as possible, but also trying to compete and really give themselves the best chance at winning without necessarily wasting their time and funds and effort, from both a testing and a financial perspective. So I think if we look at it, I mean, even back in the day before these platforms really blew up or even existed, the game still grew. It was still the same thing that it was now. Competitive players still invested a lot into the game. Yeah, it would be a little bit more difficult to test. Sometimes they would have to proxy the cards, but people still did that. I mean, it's not, people aren't like too good to proxy. People aren't too good to borrow cards. There's so many different ways that you can still test. I mean, if anything, this just pushes players to maybe go out to locals or interact even further and maybe try new ways. And if they don't have that system now, yes, obviously, if you have something like Skype and DN and you're using them together and you're doing group chats and group calls and whatnot, and you and your friends are testing in Skype calls, which is what a lot of competitive players out there do. A lot of players that are casual or trying to push their game up into that competitive circuit don't know that. When DN was still accessible, players would constantly go on there, log into Skype, log into DN, and use them cohesively and interact with individuals on a level that they weren't able to do before. Now, obviously, if we don't have that capability, you can still play test with people on Skype. You can proxy cards. You can go to locals, and I think it's almost kind of like what Pokemon Go has done for the app scene right now. Players could just sit at home, play Pokemon or video games or whatever. But now Pokemon Go is pushing players to go out, right? So maybe this is a positive thing. Maybe DN and all these other platforms being taken down could be advantageous in some sense, because players that kind of stepped away from locals, like myself or a lot of the people that I know, will be pushed back into going to locals and attending locals again if they want to continue playing and practicing. Obviously, the disadvantage is you don't have as wide of a net and wide array of individuals that you can test with consistently, especially if you don't have the funds to consistently invest into the game, every couple weeks into new cards, new sets, the latest trends. And that's where the problematic thing is. We don't know if this new simulator that Konami might release is going to be paid. We don't know if we're going to have to, if it's going to be like Hearthstone where you have to pay, you can pay for cards or have to pay for cards. It would be very problematic if that were the case, and I suspect that there's going to be huge uproar if that does happen. Right now, though, I do think that people really blew it out of proportion. I think that the game is still going to continue to thrive. It's still going to continue to excel and grow and expand for as long as, Konami and, their groups are still willing to create the product, just because, first off, this game is an addiction to a lot of people, and secondly, it's very fun and interactive from, a casual standpoint. The majority of players are casual and really just enjoy playing the game for fun and going to locals, playing with their friends one-on-one, etc. And I think this game is still going to continue to grow. This is just going to be a minor, I guess, delay in the competitive scene until players find a new, comfortable, and convenient outlet for them to test again. Obviously, I think I'm not gonna say that I agree with this. I don't really think this is the best thing to do. I don't think Konami and NAS and all these other groups that are really trying to take legal action against groups like DN or YGOpro and get them taken down should have done that in the first place. It's just kind of bothersome that it took them 5 years to do this. I mean, think about it. Why didn't they do that with YVD in the past? Why did they all of a sudden decide to do it now? Was it just because of the images? Because you could still get images back in the day. Players can proxy. Players can still do all these other things. So it doesn't make sense for me to think about the fact that, like, if NAS and Konami are trying to look at it from a financial standpoint, right? If players aren't investing into the game because there's DN, and that's a very small minority, right? And it's probably an even smaller minority of competitive players. If they're not investing into the game, right, to like purchasing cards and booster boxes because they have this outlet, they're likely still not going to invest without this outlet, just because they don't have the cards. Like they may use something else. They may use what they already have. They may borrow cards. I know tons of players that do that. So I think right now the only thing we can do is just wait. I would love to see a new outlet being put out by Konami. Obviously, I'd like to also see Dueling Network and YGOpro and DevPro continue to exist. Maybe they get some kind of new server or some kind of new way to exist and thrive, and players know about that. But it is what it is. As players, I think we just have to move on. I don't think this is necessarily this isn't a good thing by any stretch of the imagination, but it's not the worst thing that could happen. Yu-Gi-Oh definitely suffers from poor formats, poor card design as it is. So really, I mean, beyond that, we just have to move on and really just find new outlets and new ways to test. I mean, if anything, like I said, this will push players to go back to locals that don't really attend locals because they have DN or YGOpro or whatever other system they're using. I personally don't really know how this will affect me. I mean, right now, because I'm taking a break from competitive Yu-Gi-Oh because of school and my internship, I think personally that I'm just going to continue to, dabble here and there in different things. But as far as game promotion, it's really going to hurt the promotion of the game because there's so many YouTube channels out there that indirectly promote Yu-Gi-Oh! Or directly promote Yu-Gi-Oh! Just by showcasing deck profiles on DN or YGOpro or DevPro. There's channels that thrive off of this, and it's promotion, for future product or current product using, new decks that aren't out yet, or they show off new cards that Konami's releasing that, maybe they haven't thought of a certain combo, and now it, builds up hype behind a deck or strategy, or even stuff that exists or has existed, it thrives. Channels thrive on this, but if they don't have these outlets to produce this product, because as a channel, if I, let's say, want to talk about some kind of card or some kind of deck, and I can't build the deck because it's not out yet, or because I don't have the cards or don't have the funds to invest in it, because, a lot of us don't. We usually have to use DN or DevPro to talk about stuff like that. Now, if we're unable to do that, there's not going to be as much hype, which means indirectly players are less likely to know about cards and strategies and all these other things, which means they're less likely to invest in those products, So everything's very interconnected. It's very complex. I think people are making a very big simplification and really oversimplifying the whole DN and DevPro case and YGOpro. There's a lot of different aspects that you can look at. You can look at it from, like a variation of financial aspects, social aspects, in terms of community and interconnectedness and networking that players gain from these outlets. A combination of both, from a legal standpoint of, card images and rights and all that other nonsense. So I'm not going to delve into that. You could probably beat this topic to death. I know a lot of other channels have talked about it. TeamOneInch wanted me to talk about it. So those are my thoughts. Again, hopefully we get a new simulation. Obviously, I'm not happy about it, but I mean, I think you just have to be positive and move on. If this was like your main source for testing, or your main source for communicating with individuals, try and find new outlets, try and find new ideas. I'm sure you're still going to come up with them. A lot of players aren't just necessarily, like, there's a lot of players that could quit because of this, but there's a lot of players that are still going to continue to play and aren't actually going to quit because of this. So players just have to keep their heads up and just be hopeful. I think that's the best thing we can do in the short run as well as the long run. So that's really it. I hope you guys enjoyed this discussion. It's a little bit longer than I expected it. I've had a ton of takes and I messed up a ton of times. So I hope this was at least sufficient enough for their channel, as well as exhibiting my thoughts and opinions on this topic. So I'll see you guys. Take care. Have a great day. And I hope you guys continue to watch TeamOneInch and are willing to come and check out my channel if you guys already haven't. Take care, guys. And this has been your Time Wizard, Inch95, signing off. Have a great day, guys.